light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. I say lots of controversial things, and I believe in people's freedom to disagree, and I understand that there are many different opinions on every subject, and I am not recommending in any sense of the word that my opinions necessarily become anyone else's, but rather perhaps by sharing my opinions it will encourage each of you to think through your own opinions and figure out why you believe what you do and to what extent you would take those beliefs in various circumstances. Somebody asked once if Sister Who, what if I had offered to be a guest speaker for a meeting of an organization that dealt with parents accepting their children who they found out were gay or lesbian. And somebody expressed the concern that, well, what if they think that you're what their children are going to turn out like? And I said, no, I don't think there's much chance of that. I don't know too many people who are willing to go through 3 hours of face paint every time they appear in public. It's a little bit too much to ever catch on. But in any case, I don't see myself as a role model so much as that I see myself as an eclectic mystic, a teacher, a servant, someone who would do whatever I can to support your personal and spiritual growth in whatever ways are individually appropriate to you. Part of that is bringing up all the different perspectives and ideas and ways of looking at something so that you can wrestle with your own questions in the most intelligent way possible, in the most effective way possible. As I talk off the top of my head when we record these shows, because they're not pre-scripted, so whatever comes to mind is what I share with my audiences, and I want to be a presence that affirms life and love and peace and mutual respect and so on. But I recognize that because I am an anomalous person, there are a number of my own opinions and such that probably no one agrees with and no one has to agree with. Maybe not no one, but most people don't. One of those, and you may have heard me in other episodes make comments from time to time about organ donation and such, and it's a common practice within our current world because our medical science has advanced to the point of being able to transplant organs from one person's body to another in order to prolong life. The problem with that is that, of course, there are never enough organs to go around. Science is still working on ways that we could grow replacement organs without them being donated by anyone, and I think that's a fascinating and wonderful avenue to pursue. Could I leave a tissue sample cryogenically preserved in some hospital vault or something so that in the event of an accident, the hospital staff could access that tissue sample from myself and regrow whatever organ I needed to heal from whatever injury or accident occurred? I think that's a wonderful possibility. I have some personal scruples, though, when it comes to harvesting organs from another person who has died through whatever means and using those organs in another person. I have friends who, because of organ donation, are still alive now, and they would have died without their transplants. And I'm not wishing them gone or anything like that. I'm not saying what they did was a bad thing. I think it's one of those things where we really don't know. But there are some really serious considerations to bear in mind. On one hand, if you are given an organ and your life is prolonged, to live with commitment and dedication and awareness that you have been given a second chance on life. You have been given more time than you would have had and to use that time in a way that honors the person who gave you the ability to do it. That in receiving a new heart or whatever, or a new kidney or whatever it is, that your life from that point on will be lived in a way that benefits humanity, and that over and over and over again says, this is what I am doing to demonstrate my thankfulness for having a longer time on this earth. That instead of dying at age 30, I will now live to age 70 or something like that. And those remaining years of my life will be spent really making a positive difference. I'm not just going to spend the rest of my life being selfish and greedy or doing things for my own enjoyment without any consideration of how it affects others. I'm going to get involved in making the world a better place because I have been given the gift of life from someone else. On the other side of that is the way humanity in general, I suppose, has a really hard time accepting its own mortality. And I don't remember exactly which episode it was, but I love the episode of Star Trek Next Generation when Captain Picard was trying to educate someone about human life, and he said, we have to come to terms with the fact that our time in this universe is finite, that we do run out of time, that there's only so much that can be done, and then it's somebody else's job to carry on the work. If we try to extend our lives at the expense of anyone, just so that we can extend our life, it becomes kind of a selfish, narcissistic endeavor that actually devalues life, or especially devalues the lives of those whose organs and body parts and so forth were sacrificed so that ours could continue. Which, on a different tangent that I'll try not to pursue right now, is only one step away from the argument that some of my vegan friends would advance, that eating animals is extending our life by consuming somebody else's life. But coming back to the point of organ donation, we now have this ghastly practice of black market organs, that there are children and people in impoverished countries who are literally being killed so that their organs can be harvested and sold for thousands upon thousands of dollars to people in other countries, through these advanced medical procedures. It's a complex area to consider because there are ways that this knowledge and this ability can be constructively used and responsibly used, and there are ways that it can be absolutely abused and misused. Whether we get a donated organ or not, if we need one, whether or not our life continues or ends, it still leaves us all in this place of saying yes, but what does it mean? If I do get another 20 years, if I do get another 50 years, what does it mean? What do I do with that other than say he lived, he died, he had a factory job? No offense to factory workers intended by that, but to me, there were people I met in the past when I worked in a factory, and we developed some unique friendships there, and I think they were wonderful and valuable people, and they were performing a valuable service. In most cases, I found the most amazing people who could do so much more if they were just given an opportunity. As humanity continues to progress, it also becomes more and more the case that machines are taking over factory jobs, leaving more and more factory workers either without a job or with the opportunity to become more, depending on how one perceives it. That when your factory job disappears, because now there's a machine that does that, instead of saying, the world has no use for me, goodbye cruel world, and so forth, I have known far too many friends who committed suicide over the simple fact that the money ran out and there was no place to go because the world had not provided viable alternatives for them. And it's tragic when that happens, because even the most basic factory the most basic factory worker, by which I mean friends I knew when I worked in a sausage factory who had graduated from high school and that was it, and then they went to work in the factory, and that's as far as their life went. But as I talked with them, they had understandings of music and relationships and life that were positively fascinating. And I think the world would have been blessed if they had been given the encouragement and the opportunity to become mental health professionals and social workers and engineers and international consultants dealing with foreign languages and complex situations. The potential within each person is phenomenal. The fact that we leave so many people in what is frequently described as dead-end jobs that over time are gradually replaced by machines doing that job, there is so much potential and intelligence and love and ability in those people that is so undeveloped. It's a massive untapped resource. As long as we're alive, there's always hope that things can get better. There's always an opportunity with each new day to do something more than we've ever done before. Which would seem to say, well, why don't we support organ donation? Well, except that it's all these people overlapping throughout human history. And we each do everything that we can and try to make good choices and live as long as we can in a healthy way. And then we hand it off to the next person to finish the work or to continue the work. Even if the work may not be finished for hundreds of years, but it can be continued, each person standing on the shoulders of the one before. If there were organ donation, if there were ways of extending life through extreme measures, wouldn't that make sense to do it? Well, it depends on what those extreme measures are. If it encourages black market organ harvesting, that to me is a heinous evil. If it's simply about me not accepting my mortality, well, that's something I need to accept, period. Now or later, whenever, I need to deal with my own mortality. And if I get an organ donation for no other reason than that I don't want to deal with it, I don't think that's a good reason. If I get an organ donation so that I can be a blessing to humanity, that to me would be a legitimate reason. There was a television show that I saw the other night that I'm sure it was incredibly controversial, and maybe some people who saw the episode will recognize what I'm describing. There was a prisoner who was identified as an organ donor possibility. He wanted to give one of his kidneys, or part of his liver, I think it was. But then he had a negative reaction to the anesthesia, so they decided they couldn't do the operation because they couldn't remove part of his liver because they couldn't do an operation without anesthesia. He wound up committing suicide so that they could harvest the liver and save a young boy's life. The doctor who was talking to this boy who didn't want part of a prisoner to be part of his body, she explained to him that he was a man who made some mistakes. He wanted to make things right, and he didn't have any other way he could do it. So he gave his life so that he could give something empowering to you. Wonderful explanation, which of course resolves all the different dilemmas and such, but she said, can you be part of him making things right? Can you be a collaborator with him to take his life that has been so abused and misspent and riddled with crime and the effects of crime? And can you make some little part of him go in a positive direction because he's handing it to you and you have the opportunity to take this and live a truly exemplary life? And the young man seemed to have parents who were ideal for that situation. A lot of us don't have ideal parents and ideal families. But it was a way that within that show the organ donation was justified and the suicide of the prisoner was excused. And I don't know that there's a one-size-fits-all right or wrong answer to those sorts of situations. It's a lot of judgment calls. And on one hand, I guess what makes it especially difficult is that the prisoner was not only one thing. He was not only a bad man, he was not only a murderer, he was not only a prisoner, he was not only a particular nationality. The prisoner was a combination, a convergence, if you will, of experiences and negative things that had been done to him, which, for better or for well, may have provoked, I'm not sure what the right terminology is, may have provoked him to do bad things to others. Brokenness always has a tendency to reproduce itself. Anytime something bad is done to someone, they specifically need some sort of mental health counseling or something so that they do not become a carrier of that brokenness to someone else. There has to be a way of addressing things by mental health professionals or by whatever means where we stop the cycle so that the brokenness is no longer able to reproduce itself further. And coming back to the subject of organ donation, if there is to be organ donation, we need to be just as concerned that what we're supporting is a betterment of life, not just a continuance of a meaningless life. But then as soon as I say that, I know someone out there is going to be saying, well, who's to decide? And that's a very good question. Who is to decide? And my first suggestion is that the recipient should be the one to decide. If I am going to receive this donated organ, am I going to commit myself to live a worthy life? Or am I going to be just as selfish as I was before? And if that person cannot commit or agree or somehow demonstrate a self-chosen kind of worthiness, but then of course you still get into the area of what if they commit to it but don't follow through, and I'm sure that would happen a lot of times too. I don't know that the possibilities of failure are enough reason to not even ask the question or have the discussion. That if a person has said adamantly, absolutely not, I will not do anything good with my life, I'm going to go out and get drunk every night, and I can't imagine why somebody would say that. But if someone were to commit themselves to a self-destructive path, that perhaps in a sense they were trying to commit suicide and all they did was adequately threaten their own health, that only an organ transplant would keep them alive. That they did not succeed in killing themselves, they only succeeded in making themselves terminal. And someone else pressures them and insists upon them, you need to get an organ transplant so that you can continue to live. And they say, don't you get it? I want to die. And we may disagree with their reasons. We may say, this is wrong. Nobody intelligent would ever want to die. And I would just say, not so fast. Let's have a dialogue. Let's find out what's going on in that person's life. Because if they are truly in a situation that is so disempowered and oppressive, locking them into that situation and refusing to let them leave is a cruel thing to do. I don't know which is more cruel, though. Locking them into a situation that they cannot improve because of societal oppression, or not responding to their need in the first place. That we shouldn't have to wait until somebody is suicidal before we address the ways that their circumstances recommend against continuing life. That when someone is feeling oppressed, instead of saying, not my problem, we say, what can I do about that? And if it is a societal thing, that our whole system is so broken that there's just no way for one individual to fix that, well, then we need to get out and start educating people and start talking to our neighbors and talking to communities and talking to anyone who will listen and fix the things that are broken so that we don't leave people with problems that are simply unsolvable. Because in so many instances, the only reason the problems are unsolvable is because people refuse to work together. If it took a whole community, a whole state, a whole nation to create a particular societal dysfunction, it's probably going to require the same number of people working together to set things right again. At the end of this discussion, I guess, I come back to saying, if life is that oppressive that it hurts and there is no stopping the hurt, and if we cannot give you anything to justify why the hurt has to continue, if there's nothing being accomplished, if there is nothing except the pain, if there is no growth, no love, no learning, no giving, no anything, personally, my choice is the person needs to be able to choose to go. But at the same time, I would rave at the surrounding society. How is it that you can have so much and not be able to offer this person a viable alternative? Not be able to offer them any hope of getting beyond the pain? And not being able to grant them a sense of purpose in their life. Coming back to our original topic our original subject of organ donation, I personally choose not to do organ donation, not because I want to be selfish with my organs, but because I want to affirm dealing with the finiteness of life in the most constructive fashion, and in also modeling not being afraid of death, that when it comes, it comes. And if I should develop cancer, I have already decided I don't want radiation, I don't want chemotherapy. I will deal with it through natural methods, and when my time is up, my time is up. That is my choice. Even as I say that, I know friends who have chosen to fight cancer and have beaten cancer and have survived, and they have used all of the things I said I would not. And I respect their choice, and I'm glad they're still here. And I'm glad it worked. It's just not a choice that I could make myself. I guess if I were to make any sort of statement around this very complicated, complex issue, people need to be able to make choices. And they need to be able to make intelligently informed choices. And both the doctors and the people need to accept that what we're doing here ultimately is trying. We can try all sorts of things, but we can't guarantee which thing will work. We simply have to know with which choice are we content to live. That win, lose, or draw, what will I be glad that I tried? Not everybody wins, not everybody loses either. Some people do win, and some people do lose. And somewhere in the middle of all that is each of us trying to figure out what choices we're going to make and why. And allowing other people to make different choices according to their own reasons. And trying to keep the practices that we embrace as healthy and as moral and sound and holistically good as possible. Within the Star Trek Voyager series on television, there was a race they encountered called the Bedians that had been afflicted with a particular plague that was destroying their bodies so fast that the only way they were able to keep themselves alive was by cannibalizing parts from other species. And so their medical technology had advanced to radical degrees, far beyond anything that humanity was able to match. But they had not been able to find a cure for this biological weapon that had been inflicted upon them. Until, of course, they met someone in the Voyager crew who was of Klingon descent, and lo and behold, something about the Klingon blood system was totally resistant to the disease. So the series kind of ended with this hope left out there, never really developed, that that race might eventually find a cure to this biological weapon that had been inflicted on them. It still all comes back to making choices, and making the choices that you can live with, and respecting that other people will make different choices, and that's okay. They need to make the choices that they can live with. And somewhere in all of that interrelation and interdependence, to find the beauty and the value and the contributions that each person can make, so that for whatever time we're here on Earth, however many trips around the sun, as Casey Musgrave says in her song, however many trips around the sun you get, that you make them count, that you make them beautiful, that you make them empowering, that you make them something that others will want to remember for a long time after you're gone. Thank you very much for watching.